I apologise for the clickbaity title, but this is absolutely true. This did happen to me. Before you ask, no, it was not one of those situations where I got like scammed into carrying a shoebox full of cash out into the street to meet someone. But I did lose out on £10,000 because I did not see the red flags in somebody that I knew, and I should have listened to Gavin de Becker and his Gift of Fear book. So I'm going to talk to you today about the red flags that I should have spotted. Hi everyone, I'm Rosie Blythe. I'm the author of the Princess Guide to Life book series, and on this channel we talk about everything from books to spirituality to royals to TV characters. And I promised you another story inspired by my review of The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. I've done a few videos now based on this book. First was a review, and then I told some stories about when I had got out of trouble by using my instincts. Today it's a story where I got into trouble because I didn't listen to my instincts. So a little bit of background for you. I live on a boat and I have a dog, and those two things do influence my life quite a bit in terms of how much time I spend chatting to complete strangers, because on the canal there's quite a community. We all do just kind of chat to each other. Boaters are really good in general. Like if you're ever in trouble, you know, go next door. The person in that boat will probably be able to help you out. It's a really nice kind of community. And with the dog as well, I'm really used to just chatting to people. You'll meet someone in a park or something and your dogs are playing, so you end up walking around together. Maybe you never see them again. Maybe you end up seeing them all the time and you end up swapping numbers and becoming really good friends with them. So that is kind of where I was at when this story begins. So this is a few years ago now. It was the summer after I got my dog. So we were just in the park one day and he was playing around, and I started talking to this lady because she'd been making a fuss of the dog. And it was like, oh, you're walking this way? I'll walk with you. And we were chatting away and it was like, oh, this is so nice. Like we should continue this talk. We should like get coffee sometime. And I can't remember which of us kind of initiated that. It could well have been me because I am quite outgoing these days, or at least I was. This story has kind of made me a little bit more wary. But I was very much just like, start talking to someone, you're getting really well, why not continue that connection? Other people around this time, there are other examples of when I'd been chatting with a couple of dog walkers and they were like, oh, let's swap numbers, we can all meet up again because our dogs seem to like each other. So this was completely normal to me. It wasn't unusual.
Although when I look back on it now, I suppose it is relatively unusual to befriend someone on the basis of a single meeting, and maybe I should have been aware that only weirdos move that fast. Maybe I'm a weirdo, I don't know.
So anyway, met up with this lady. Let's call her Emma. That wasn't her name, there's nothing like her name. So we met up for drinks. Yes, we went for drinks rather than coffee. And we had a great time. Had a real laugh. Great, I've got a really good new friend. But then she seemed quite keen to meet up again. And I was going through a very busy period of my life. I was still adjusting to having a new dog. I had rats in my boat at the time. That's a whole other story I'll have to talk to you about some other time. And just in general, my life was busy and, you know, somewhat stressful. So although it was nice to, you know, have a new friend, I didn't have a huge amount of time spare for her. And a lot of my friendships are like, you know, we meet up every, I don't know, 3 or 4 months or something, and that's fine. We may not have a huge amount of contact in between, but I'll catch up with people, we'll have a coffee or dinner or whatever, and it's great, and we're all on the same page. But with her, it was different. It was like she kept messaging me, and I'd be like, oh, you know, it'd be really nice to chat. I'm super duper busy right now, sorry. And she was like leaving me really long, rambling voice notes about, you know, the minutiae of her day. And like maybe that is normal for some people with their best friends. Like I don't do that with my close friends, but I could, you know, it's not weird to me that some people would do that. But this was someone I just met. So I was like, why is she telling me everything about her day as if we're besties? And I would delay responding, just because as soon as I did respond, she would then respond again. It's like, well, I don't have time to go back and forth messaging someone all day. I'm working, I'm doing stuff. So I would always kind of leave it a day, and then she'd respond immediately, and then I'd leave it like another day, just trying to sort of make the timeline feel a bit more normal to me. And I was like, well, you know, people have different expectations for friendships. It's kind of weird that she's doing this with someone that she just met, but whatever. And I think possibly there was a kind of sexual aspect to this, because she did mention that she was bisexual. And then in retrospect, I was like, oh, maybe she thought I was picking her up, you know, talking to her in the park and going, hey, let's swap numbers. Like, maybe that to her meant like I must be interested. And me in my innocence, I was just like, I've made a great new friend. So I'm going to talk about the red flags that should have let me know that this was a strange person. Because I don't know, I get on well with weirdos. I don't know if I'm neurodivergent in any way, but they do say the way to know is put you into a room with other neurodivergent people and see how quickly you bond. And most of my really good friends are ADHD and autistic, so I don't know what that says about me. Maybe there's some neurospiciness, I don't know. But I did get on really well with her. So the fact that she was then quite strange in her sort of way of doing the friendship, I was just like, well, whatever. Like, I enjoy her company when I see her, I just don't want to have this constant contact with her. But she wasn't taking hints. So like most people, I think if you kept trying to message them every day and they were trying to, you know, put the brakes on, you'd probably get the hint, like, okay, they don't want to do daily contact. They don't want to do long rambling voice notes back. Like, she'd send me a long voice note, I'd send a quick text back. So it's like, yeah, different communication styles, but you would think some people would be kind of like, oh, okay, maybe I'll adjust my communication style to match this person. But no, she carried on doing the rambling thing. There were a few little red flags where I was like, she's not picking up on hints. I remember one time I said to her in a message, I'd love to meet up, but I am absolutely flat out super busy right now. It's not going to be possible. And then she sent me a message, or a voice note rather, and she was like, oh, I'm planning to do a bike ride through along the canal. I think I might drop in on you. Yeah, I'll drop in on you and I'll bring food. I was like, no, you haven't been invited. It's like introvert's nightmare. And, you know, one great thing about being an introvert and living on a boat is people don't know where you are unless you tell them, so you can just move and be in a different area. Anyway, so I was just sort of trying to put the brakes on to just slow this down, because, like I said, I enjoyed her company when I saw her, but I didn't really want to have her, you know, in my life that much. Another red flag was that she had a daughter who was, I think, late teens or maybe 20-ish, that she was estranged from, that she didn't speak to, or who didn't speak to her. I didn't like to ask her about it because she sort of mentioned it in passing a few times. And I didn't want to go, ooh, what happened? Because, like, that's, you know, people don't want the dramas in their life to be gossip fodder for you. But I got, you know, basically picked up on the fact that she would like to reconcile with her daughter, and her daughter didn't want to know. And I don't know, that's all I know. I don't know anything else about it. But to me, I think, bit of a red flag if someone's child doesn't talk to them.
And obviously this is one of those things where you don't know what's gone on at all. So you feel like, I can't make any judgment about some situation I know nothing about. But I think someone who has stopped speaking to their mum, something has gone down, hasn't it? No idea who would be to blame in that situation, but it is unusual. Another red flag is that when I met her, she talked about her job and I just kind of assumed she'd been there for a while and it was quite steady. She didn't refer to it as being a new job or anything. But then that job ended, I can't remember why, and then she was unemployed. And I'm not being judgy about people with gaps in their employment. I have been there many times, and being freelance, I'm technically unemployed anytime I'm not specifically working, so I can't talk really. But I realised that all her jobs somehow ended up not lasting very long, and it was never her fault. And this came up in the Gift of Fear book, and I think it's basic common sense that when someone never takes responsibility or accepts any part of the blame, that's not great. She also slept with the guy at the job seekers place who was meant to be helping her get jobs. So again, a little bit weird, maybe a lack of boundaries. This may all just be that she was neurodivergent, so I don't want to bash her personality type. But I did think it was quite unusual to have this kind of rudderless employment history. And it came up in conversation where she'd mentioned like, oh yeah, so 2 years ago I was out of work then and I had no money. And I was like, oh, okay, so this isn't a recent development. It's been a long running pattern in your life for a while now.
So now we come to how I lost out on £10,000. So I take part in medical trials occasionally, and they can be fairly decent pay. It might be like £3,000 or £4,000 for like a few weeks of you go into hospital. Basically they give you something that they're trialing, and then they'll do like blood test, urine test, blood pressure, everything, like every day, several times a day probably. But I really enjoy them because it's like a little staycation in hospital. I get to watch movies and like meditate and read books and get on with work, and you don't have to do any like household chores or food shopping or food preparation. Get all your meals made for you. So like to me it's just like a lovely holiday from everyday life. And so I've done quite a few over the years, and I had been screened and been accepted for this very lucrative one of the highest paid I've ever seen. Normally they're like 3,000 or 4,000. This was 10,000, and it was like stretched over like 6 months or something like that, or maybe even a year, where you'd have a stay in hospital, but then you'd have so many follow-ups, like it would kind of take over your life for quite some time. So that's why it was so well paid. But I had been screened and I'd been accepted, but then they changed the dates, and they said to make sure that we've got all of our records really up to date, you'll need to come in and screen again. So I was like, fine. I wasn't expecting there to be any issues, because as I said, because I'd already been accepted, so like my name was on the list and it was just a formality. I went in, so I did my, blood test, urine test, and I was lying there getting my ECG, and halfway through, the nurse came in and started taking the stickers off, and she said, "This has got to stop." And I was like, "This is weird." And they pulled me to one side and they said, "You can't take part in this study anymore because we found traces of drugs in your system." And I was like, "What?" And I asked, like, what kind, like, can you test me again? Like, this is impossible. And they said it was benzodiazepines, which is, I think, as much as I can tell, is like an anti-anxiety drug. I think Rohypnol also falls into this category. And I was just like, this is crazy. Like, of course, I haven't taken any drugs. I wouldn't even know where to get them. If I was going to take anti-anxiety drugs, I wouldn't do it just before a drug screening. Like, I've done probably like 8 medical trials at this point. Like, I know the drill. And when you think about the medical trials, of not just the screenings for the trial, but the follow-up appointments, dozens, if not maybe 100 appointments, never any drugs, because I don't do drugs. But you can guess where this is going, can't you? And I just thought, okay, the only thing I've done this week is I went out for dinner with my friend Emma. So at this dinner, which was the last time I saw her in person, I did leave the table. I went to the toilet, and also I went to the bar to order desserts. So there were a couple of times where I left the table and my food and my drink were there, because you're not expecting someone who you're friends with to slip you a roofie or whatever, especially not a woman. Now this is the thing. I don't know that she slipped me a drug.
But I was forced to this conclusion because in that week or so before my appointment, going to dinner with her was the only time I'd been out other than going around to my parents' house. So it was like, it kind of had to be her. There was no opportunity for anyone else. I wasn't taking any other kind of medication. And like I said, I'd had so many of these tests before. I think if I was inadvertently eating or drinking something that gave a false positive, for instance, it would have already been flagged up at some point.
And I would sort of describe this to my friends. I would sort of say this is what happened, and everyone was just like, "It's so obviously her. Like, come on. Like, what are you talking about? It could be." And it's like, yeah, it does seem pretty certain that I can't prove it. Also, at this dinner, she was telling me about how she had stopped taking her anti-anxiety medication. Like, she was saying, like, "Oh yeah, I weaned myself off it." So again, in retrospect, it's like, okay, so she had some spare pills knocking around then that she could, or whatever it was that she used, she could just slipped in my drink or whatever. And also at this dinner, I was talking about how busy and stressed I was. So maybe she thought, do you a favour, I'll slip you a little something that should give you relief from the anxiety. I know a few people who've taken these kind of things and they're like, oh yeah, you wouldn't feel it. You wouldn't feel the difference from one. But obviously it was in my system. I cannot prove it, and I didn't get to ask her about it because she, like, after this, I think she texted me once and I texted back, and then she ghosted me. She ghosted me. So, and it was funny because I had sort of been thinking, like, right, okay, next time I see her, I'm just going to slip into conversation. Like, oh yeah, I missed out on this trial because they found an anti-anxiety drug in my system. Can you imagine? Just to see how she would react. But I never got the chance because, yeah, she disappeared. She disappeared from my life, which I think in itself is quite strange. Like, people don't normally do that. And I don't know if maybe she was testing me. She was like, oh, I'll disappear and see if Rosie will chase me. And I was just like, don't poke the bear. Like if someone crazy leaves your life, don't chase after them.
And by the way, she is still alive. I had a notification in WhatsApp that she'd changed her number, so it's not like she's completely disappeared off the face of the earth.
So I was just extremely relieved to not be getting these, crazy voice notes every day. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about more red flags that in retrospect make so much sense. So we've already got, she didn't really understand boundaries or the sort of social norms of friendship.
And this sort of instant friendship, I guess you'd call it love bombing in a relationship. You could also say this falls into the category of forced teaming that Gavin de Becker mentioned. It makes a we out of two people. And you could argue that people just have different communication styles, but this felt like a lot of pressure to me at this time.
So, and also, like, she would say things like, she would always talk about her other friends. And I would be like, well, you're talking about having lots of other friends, but if you had so many other friends, why would you just glom onto someone and just immediately start trying to be their best friend and bombard them with messages when you've just met them? So we have the not respecting boundaries or not understanding social norms. We have the being estranged from a daughter who, most mother-daughter relationships don't become estranged, even if they're bad. They don't, separate completely. In Gavin de Becker's book, The Gift of Fear, he talked about how people will sometimes make a joke because they do actually believe something, in the back of their mind, but they don't want to say it. So the example he used is somebody who was in the mailroom and they got this mysterious package and they were like, I'm going to get out of here before the bomb goes off. And of course, there was a bomb. So they were like, part of them did think that, but they didn't want to say it, seriously. So they said it as a joke. And there is something that kind of crossed my mind. So the first time we met up, I'd said to her, oh, do you want to come to the boat for a cup of tea? Because my boat was moored nearby where we'd met and where she worked near. And that to me was completely normal. One of my really good friends, actually, we met when our boats were moored next to each other, and we just got chatting because we were both happened to be getting home at the same time. And she was like, do you want to come in for a cup of tea? Yes, great. Went in, had a lovely time, and we've been friends ever since. So that wasn't weird to me to just ask a female friend to my home. And she said something like, oh no, not the first time, let's meet at the pub. And I was sort of thinking, that's a bit strange, because that's what I'd say to a guy if he invited me around to dinner for a first date, which I have had people I've never met, online going, oh, do you want to come around? And no, I'm not coming to your house for dinner for the first time I meet you, you crazy. But I did think that was a little bit odd that she sort of thought that about me. Maybe she's being the normal one here and I'm being the weirdo, because I've heard a few stories recently actually about girls targeting other girls and they get them involved in trafficking and stuff. Maybe she thought I was going to do that to her. I don't know. Maybe she was being very cautious. But to me, in retrospect, it made me think, was she just judging everyone else by her standards? If she was a weirdo, maybe she thought I was a weirdo too. Anyway, when we'd gone out for drinks a few times, we only actually met maybe 5 times. It was over a year or something. But I remember one time, so she'd been to my boat, so we'd had tea and cake or whatever, because that's what I do with my friends. I bring them around for tea and cake in the boat. It's super cozy. Just call me Mr. Tumnus. And I remember she said to me oh, I could make some food and bring it round. And I remember at the time kind of thinking, first of all, I was a little bit paranoid. I was like, oh, maybe she thinks my kitchen isn't hygienic, because this is something I always slightly worry about in my boat, that people are going to think that my kitchen is dirty and it's camping, but my kitchen is very clean. And I always sort of say to people, I'm washing my hands now before I bring us the cake, because you've seen me petting the dog and stuff, or just doing outdoorsy things. So I always like to let people know that I'm being clean and hygienic. So I was a little bit oh, maybe she thinks my kitchen's dirty and that's why she wants to bring food round. But do you know what else I thought? I remember thinking, I wonder if she's going to slip something in the food, because I did kind of have the feeling that maybe she liked me a little bit like that. And I thought maybe she's just she wants to get me drunk or something to see what happens. So yeah, in retrospect, the fact that I had that thought, even though that seemed crazy because she was my friend who's offering to bring food round, what are you thinking? Oh, she's going to drug you. But that thought crossed my mind. So I think when we have what seem like crazy paranoid thoughts, maybe they're not that crazy and paranoid. So anyway, I missed out on that incredibly lucrative medical trial. And the worst thing was it came up again, like they sometimes do different cohorts. And I was like, oh, can I do it now? And they were like, no, sorry, because you screened for it more than twice, you can't do it. And I was like, it wasn't even my fault you changed the dates. But I get it. They probably just think I secretly take drugs. And it's just like, with like a sense of injustice, like I would never do that. Like, do you think I'm stupid? I wouldn't take drugs and then come to a drug screening. Anyway, so that is my little story about how sometimes like people that you think are your friends, they're not your friends. And maybe she thought she was doing me a favour. Maybe she was like, poor Rosie, she's so stressed. I have anti-anxiety pills in my purse. I could just put one in her drink and she'll feel so much better. And she didn't know the repercussions that it was going to have. But yeah, it cost me £10,000. So that is another Gift of Fear related true story. And I do have one more Gift of Fear video that I want to make. There's a movie called Speak No Evil with James McAvoy that I think is a perfect example of a lot of Gift of Fear stuff. So I'm going to do a video on that. Look out for that coming soon. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope that you found it useful and informative. Thank you for liking the video. Thank you for subscribing to the channel, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Bye. I was really in that mode of like, you shut up, you